By day, Miss Weber is a biology teacher at Albemarle High School.
This is what we need to focus on. Okay? All right, are you good? Oh, thank you.
But when the bell rings, she becomes something much, much more. That's when she transforms into Dr. Science. She searches the globe for interesting research to bring back to her students. Today, Dr. Science will sit down with Dr. Jason Papin, a professor of biomedical engineering at the University of Virginia.
Specific expertise.
Dr. Papin builds computer models of the processes that happen inside of cells.
So inside of a single cell, our body's made up of billions and billions and trillions of cells. And within each one of those cells, you have lots of different molecules, like proteins and metabolites, that are all interacting with each other. You have thousands of them. They all have different structures. They all do different things, have different jobs. So within a cell, we build a computer model of how all of those thousands of things help each other, talk to each other, work with each other. And then with these computer models, we can start to predict, well, if I put the cell in a different environment, or if I have a drug that comes in and it hits one particular part of that network, what happens to everything else? And so those computer models can be very effective in that way.
This is an example of one of the large biological networks that Professor Papin's lab has developed. The process of creating one of these models begins with an organism's DNA.
Inside of your cells, you have instructions. And that DNA, those instructions tell the cell what to do and how to do it. And so we have that sequence. And we start with that, and then you're delineating what are all the genes and what are their specific functions. And then you have a mathematical equation that represents each of those functions. And so there's theory as well as, I guess you could say, theory-based and data-based. So we have an equation basically for each of those 1,000 functions that the genome is telling you is present in that particular bug or that particular cell. And then we end up building a model that's a big matrix. Matrix is okay? So a big matrix that has about 1,000 columns and 1,000 rows. And each element in there basically corresponds to which metabolite is participating in which reaction. And so that's 4 months about to kind of assemble that. And then once you have a mathematical equation of that 1,000 reactions collection, you use the computer to try to say, okay, well, if all of a sudden this row is gone because of a particular drug or because of a particular mutation, how does everything else balance out or work?
Dr. Papin hopes to use these computer models to help people with cancer and infectious diseases.
Cancer, if you think about cancer, are cells that are growing when they're not supposed to be growing. So in other words, they're eating sugar, they're taking fuel from the environment, and when they're not supposed to. And so the computer models that we have help us to predict, well, which of all of these different things that are going on in the cell are going to be most effective at hitting with the drug and stopping the ability of that cancer cell to grow when it shouldn't be. So we have kind of two applications. One's in cancer. The other one where we build a lot of models for is an infectious disease. And the idea there is that you have bacteria, these little cells that shouldn't be in your body but are, and they're growing and living in your body when they shouldn't be. And again, we use computer models to try to understand why is that bacteria living there, and how can I stop it from growing when it shouldn't be. So we build computer models, we make predictions, and then we go into the lab and we actually do experiments to show that our computer models are accurate or not. And then the hope is that we can then take that and then help develop new drugs that can help treat these diseases in patients and people. Done and others in the field.
Not only are these models useful in medical applications, Dr. Papin can also use them to create efficient biofuels.
And so the idea is that you can actually grow these microbes in big tubs, and they can take corn husks or other kind of garbage living material and convert it into fuel, convert it into ethanol or other things. And there have been some models of bugs that can make that conversion more efficient. And there's a few examples where they've actually progressed and are able to make these bacteria make these very valuable commodities and chemicals. We've built a model of this algae, and so the idea would be to use a model to predict how would you engineer the algae to convert sunlight into different fuels more efficiently. There's a lot of good examples like that.
Yeah. As all good scientists must, Dr. Papin reflects on the ethical issues surrounding his research.
So one is just the idea where you're manipulating the DNA in the cell. So where you have applications, you want to try to get a bacteria to produce a fuel based off of corn husks, for example. You're going to be manipulating the DNA of that bug. And so that brings up some questions that people have. What if the bug gets out in the environment? Is it going to do something bad to the environment? There's a lot of protections, and I don't personally think that that's a concern that's really significant, but some people definitely have questions about that. Other ethical concerns in the field have to do with just having genome sequence information. So, all of us have different DNA sequence. That's what makes us all different. It gets cheaper and easier to delineate what my DNA sequence is. Well, let's say that my DNA sequence is on the web somewhere, and all of a sudden someone finds out that if you have this particular sequence of DNA, you're more likely to develop heart disease, or you're more likely to whatever the disease or whatever the characteristic, more likely to have an addictive personality, for example. All of a sudden someone can know that about me. And so there's a lot of discussion about protecting that kind of genetic data and information, keeping that so that insurance companies can't use them, employers can't use them in making hiring decisions. That's a big ethical discussion in the field for sure.
Biomedical engineering is unique because it combines math and biology. Dr. Papin knew that he wanted to pursue biomedical engineering at a very early age.
How I got interested in BME, I was in ninth grade, and I remember this. It was actually a pretty monumental thing for me. So we were watching a show on PBS, my family was, some night, and I remember it was called Indestructible People. And there was this story about this kid who was born without the ability to hear. He had hearing parents, and then he got one of these cochlear implants, so one of these little devices that gets inserted that allows him to start distinguishing sounds. And I remember the kid first being able to all of a sudden notice that there were sounds around him. It was a very moving kind of story. And I thought, I want to do that. I want to do something where you build things to help people. And then in high school, I loved calculus and math classes, and I loved my AP biology class and my anatomy class. I had a good teacher in anatomy. So I loved that bio aspect as well as the math. And it just became a really natural fit. In BME, everybody has parents or siblings or people who have suffered from medical challenges. And so when you talk to your mom and you're like, hey mom, guess what? today I'm one step closer to helping cancer, or whatever it is, it's very motivating.
This motivation drives Dr. Papin every day to pursue his research in biomedical engineering. As the day comes to a close, Dr. Science must hang up her lab coat to prepare for another day at Albemarle High School.